Hi everyone. In this video I'd like to talk about the idea that the practice of semen retention for men is in accordance with nature. It's in accordance with natural law. It's in accordance with natural principles. It's in accordance with the balance of nature that we see in the world around us if we look at it. If we look to other animals, other species, well, if we look to the more developed ones like the vertebrates, the mammals especially, but some other animal types as well, they tend to have a mating season. They tend to have just a period of the year where the males particularly release their seed, and the rest of the year is kind of a build-up to that moment, to that mating season. It's all about just, in the animal's case, investing in itself, feeding, eating, growing stronger, gaining territory, exploring, and all of that culminating then in mating and in the creation of new life. And while I don't advocate obviously that we live like animals in every respect, I do feel that we can learn some things, some lessons, by looking to nature and seeing how other beings live, and reflecting that back on ourselves. And I think it's really telling that humankind, the human species, is the only one in which the male releases his seed so frequently, and where people engage in sex so frequently at all times of the year. I think there's something to that, that the way we relate to our sexuality is out of balance, and I think that has its effects on both men and women in different ways. Obviously, I can only speak to the case of men, being a man myself. But there's a sense of depletion there, that this overindulgence in sexuality and this almost, you could say, addiction to release, to depletion, that has its effects on men, that it leads us operating from a lower place. It's not where we can operate from. Like, there's this idea that sexuality is in some respects very animalistic. It stems from animal desires, but as I was saying, many of the animals, not even they, engage in sexuality to the extent that we do. I guess you could say, yeah, it's a primal animal drive to have sex, and to release that seed, to procreate, to create new life. But even animals, they have that greater degree of control. They're more in tune with nature. They have their seasons, and there's a time for it, and there's a time for also strengthening yourself, for investing in yourself, for preparing for what's ahead. I suppose if you look to some of the other great apes, like I think the bonobos, or the bonobos, however you want to pronounce that, I think they engage in quite a lot of sex as well, like humans. So I think, the question there is like, what for? Like, if we live that way, like what for, other than pleasure? And I think as men especially, we have to aim for higher ideals. That's almost what makes us human, the fact that we have that rational side of our brain that can set goals, can set a vision for our life, and it can harness and muster all of our energy and our resources towards that goal. And of course, our sexual energy is one of the most potent resources that we have at our disposal. So I think in many respects it only makes perfect sense to treasure that, to cultivate that, and to set it towards a loftier goal, a loftier ideal, a loftier vision for our lives. and not squander it, as we're kind of trained to do in society. So I really think that a man's vital essence, his seed, is like one of the most potent forces that he has at his disposal, And I've seen that experimenting with retention and going the distance with it on various streaks, I've seen the effects and I've seen the benefits that it's had, and it's 100% real, Like, I think the paradigm of just squandering your energy repeatedly, of depleting yourself over and over again, is just not viable. It's not sustainable if you want to live a life of greater meaning and have some kind of a positive impact on not only yourself but those you love and your community and society at large, through the work that you do, through the caliber of work that you put out, through how you show up as a person, and it goes much deeper than the practical side of things, because I truly believe that there is a spiritual aspect to retention, and there's a spiritual aspect to even semen, the vital essence of man, that there are spiritual effects that come with retention, that come with storing up that substance. There's esoteric talks of like the Christ oil, and there's videos about that on YouTube if you want to look it up, the Christ oil. So there's videos and there's teachings that talk about how when a man retains his seed, that substance, it doesn't just sit there idly, it has an alternative function, so you could say that the primary function of it is the procreation, creation of new life, but there's another function to it that's, you could say it's secondary, but in another respect it's just as important, which is when a man isn't procreating, that substance, I believe, is intended to be stored up and to rejuvenate the man from within on all levels, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And yeah, the spiritual side of this, I feel, is that, retaining your seed, it literally affects your consciousness. And I think most guys, like, you can probably relate to this, in if you've actually, put this into practice, and if you've tried it out, like, you've probably seen how this practice, it affects your consciousness, it affects your mentality, it affects your belief in yourself, it affects your confidence, your self-esteem, everything. It flows into all of that, and I feel like that's only the starting point, because that's kind of, again, the more practical side of things, the things that people tend to focus on. But I feel like there's another aspect to this where your consciousness starts elevating. In the beginning it can be kind of a prideful thing. It can be like the level of pride, like, oh, this makes me better, stronger, it makes me feel more confident, it makes me feel prouder of myself, that kind of level of energy. But I think it starts to go beyond that, like, there's as you cultivate your sexual energy, as you transmute it, circulate it, all of that, and put it into use, which is part of transmutation, actually, there's also courage comes with it, which is, like, according to the works of Dr. David Hawkins, who works at the levels of energy and consciousness, courage is the beginning of integrity. So it's where you cross over from a predominantly negative state to a predominantly positive state of consciousness. So pride is the end of negativity. It's like, pride is like the highest, most virtuous state that is still fundamentally negative. The lowest of the low are things like guilt and shame, and that's where you feel like despondent. And interestingly enough, feelings of guilt can really arise, and guys, I'm sure most guys can relate to this, feelings of guilt can arise when you squander your sexual energy, especially if it's like repeated and habitual, and it feels like when you give away your control and your power over that and you indulge in it animalistically on repeat, then feelings of guilt and shame can come from that. And ultimately, I feel that's because we intuit deep down that it's against nature, you know, that this isn't how it's meant to be done, you know. But anyway, those feelings, guilt and shame, they lead up to, I think, apathy. And again, interestingly enough, apathy can stem from repeated depletion. That's what I found, that, you know, repeated depletion, it brings you down into these lower states of consciousness, you know, guilt, shame, apathy. And tying in with that, after apathy, slightly higher up is fear. Fear, we all recognize, is a negative state because, yeah, it's just negative, you know, you're afraid, you're not fully empowered to take action, you know, you're kind of paralyzed with fear. But fear, at the same time, it's more energized. It's not despondent like apathy, guilt or shame, you know, it has some kind of an energy to it, even though it's frenetic. So you are moving up the scale in that regard. And after fear, I think after fear comes anger. And you can see the connection in that, where like sometimes if you're very afraid, sometimes it will transform into anger for you to take action and for you to defend yourself or to lay down your boundaries, you know. You can see that in your life, that sometimes you have that flick of the switch where you switch from fear to anger, and it shows how they're connected on that spectrum, you know. Fear leads up to anger. Anger is ultimately, again, a negative state of consciousness because it's destructive, not only to others but to yourself first and foremost. It's like that idea of, you know, if you hold hatred in your heart or anger, it's like poisoning yourself with the hope of poisoning someone else, you know. It has physiological effects, it's detrimental to life, it's an anti-life state of being. But again, it's more energized again than fear. And anger then leads into pride, which, according again to the works of Dr. Hawkins, is like the highest of the negative states of being, you know. Pride, it also kind of can lead to aggression. It can lead back down to aggression, and it's ultimately devoid of love, you know. It's a state that's devoid of love because it's very focused on the self, or at best it can be focused on a collective identity, like a group, a nation, a group of people, an ethnicity. But I will say there's a flip side to that, because, and Dr. David Hawkins, he's actually addressed this as well, that you can be coming from a place of pride in relation to a collective identity, or you can come at it from a place of love, you know. And love doesn't exclude the other. So for example, you could feel very proud about your nationality or your ethnicity, and that is a kind of a negative slant, because that perspective, it excludes others, you know, and it treats others as either, well, if it's proud, it treats others as inferior, you know. So it's a very divisive perspective. But the other side of that is that you can love your own people, you can love your nation, you can love your religious group, you can love whatever identity it is, but still have love for other people too, you know. And that's kind of a higher state. It's more of a loving state. But yeah, pride is ultimately kind of a self-centered, egoic, negative state, devoid of love. So it's the highest of the negative states, as I was saying. But you know, there can be a bit of pride involved starting out with this practice, that it's kind of like, there was another state I forgot to mention actually, which is desire. Desire is another kind of negative state, because it's like, you know, it feels, when you're in a desirous state, you feel like that which you desire is outside of you. You know, you don't have it. You're craving it. You're yearning for it. And interestingly enough, again, desire is a very strong state that comes with urges, that comes with things like pornography use, or just social media or internet or whatever other addictions. It's all rooted in desire, which is this feeling of lack and this feeling of a need to compensate with an external substance for that which is lacking within. And there's kind of just a craving energy about it, like, you know, it's very subservient kind of an energy, you know. But yeah, like starting out, for a lot of guys, there can be, you know, some pride and some desire, like, you know, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that, or I'll be this person, or people will see me that way, or I'll feel this confident. There can be that states to it. But what I've found, bringing all of this back to the original point, is that doing this practice, over time, it just inevitably raises your level of consciousness. That's what I've seen and felt in myself. It's what I've seen and felt in others, people who I've helped with this practice, that your level of consciousness, your level of awareness just rises. Like you go from a place of pride to a place of courage first and foremost. It's like, because courage, it can be a subtle thing. It can be just the acknowledgement that yes, I can do this, and yes, I am willing to do this, or yes, I commit to doing this. Just having that intention to commit to this, that in itself is courage, because you've got to turn your back on some old habits that were very comforting, perhaps, that were very pleasurable, the addiction to pornography, or the addiction to release, that's kind of trained into us, that's conditioned into us, even though it's, like I was saying, I feel against nature to at least indulge in it so frequently, as we're doing in society. And yeah, it takes courage to kind of go against that, to trust your intuition, that because this is a very intuitive thing, like whether you realize it or not, to actually decide for yourself that that form of behavior is not helping you, even if all of society is telling you otherwise, that it's the right thing to do. And to decide to embark on this journey, this quest of coming into a healthier relationship with your sexual energy and cultivating it for the betterment of yourself and everyone else. So yeah, that's a courageous act, and that then leads up to higher states, as again, I'm alluding to the works of David Hawkins and his map of consciousness. So, moving up to the level of, like, I think there comes willingness, acceptance, neutrality, in not exactly in that order, but those states. So I think with retention, we become more unfazed by life. We become more accepting of life. We become accepting of wherever we're at. We become more accepting of just what's required of us in any given moment, and we feel like we have the tools, the capacity to deal with whatever challenges life brings our way. And that's really the the level of willingness, acceptance, neutrality, those states of being that Dr. David Hawkins talks about in his works. So they're positive states of being, and you can feel that as well, like when you're on this path, that you become less prone to reactivity, to reacting to the bullshit of others, like reacting to little things that would otherwise have set you off. Like you become more grounded, you become more centered in yourself. Now, I will add that there is a caveat that some people feel that if they retain, especially for long periods, that they can become more aggressive, more prone to anger. I would suggest that that is just excess sexual energy that needs to be transmuted, that if you don't transmute it properly, that there can be aggression, and that's just excess masculine energy, But generally speaking, I think the feeling is that as you retain, you just feel more grounded in yourself, you feel more whole, you feel more confident, you feel more capable of achieving anything that you set your heart on, and that for me is like willingness, acceptance, courage, neutrality, all of these positive states, And by neutrality, I mean your mind is less prone to judge, you're less prone to assign labels to things, to think things are good or bad. You just accept what is, and you move forward from that grounded place of confidence and capability, You're less fazed by the vicissitudes of life. And also I think you come to understand or intuit the polarity of life, the swing of the pendulum, that life moves from positive to negative. That's just the nature of life, back and forth, positive and negative. But what retention does is it keeps you grounded. It keeps you it's almost like it raises you above the swing of the pendulum. So you can see the swing of the pendulum from positive to negative. You know, you see the ups and downs in life, but you're less thrown off balance by them. It's like you're not being swung by the pendulum, you're above it, just witnessing it happen from above, you know. And I suppose in that respect, retention, it kind of ties in with the idea of meditation. You know, the same benefit can be accrued. Like with meditation, the idea is that you gradually identify more and more as the observer of your thoughts than the actual thinker, you know. So in that respect, you can see the negative thoughts playing out, you can see the positive thoughts playing out in your mind, but you don't get overly attached to either of them because you become the observer. And as a result, you're less thrown about like a leaf in the wind. You're more grounded and anchored in yourself instead. And I feel that retention, practice of semen retention, has that same effect. That you become more grounded, you become more still, and you can just let life run its course, you know. And I'm not, by that I don't mean that you become passive, quite the opposite. You become more active, you become more inspired. But I'm saying you also become more willing to roll with the punches, as it were. You know, you become more willing to go with the flow of life. And in that respect, you start to embody, you know, what Bruce Lee said, where he said, "Be like water, my friend." You know, the water crashes, sometimes it rolls, sometimes it moves like a river. You know, you become at one with life more so, I feel. And on the deepest level, that's really because you're actually just cultivating more life within yourself. As I say often, like semen, it's the vital essence of man. You know, it's the seed of your vitality, your life essence as a man. You know, so it only makes sense to me as you cultivate that within, as you store it up and not squander it. That because, you know, the seed, it takes quite a while to produce that, to cultivate it. Proper amounts of that in your system. So if you're depleting yourself of that all the time, you're literally depleting yourself of your life force, of your vital essence, you know. And so it only makes sense to me as you instead store that up, that you become brimming with life, you know. And do you see how everything is connected here? Like everything I'm talking about, it's all connecting together. Everything is just connected. Like I just had an interesting synchronicity where even as I just said that, like it was like 222, like 22 minutes, 22 seconds. But yeah, like I just see how everything is very synchronous, everything is connected together. Like as you're cultivating this life force energy, you're brimming with energy. And that's where the glow comes from, I feel. You know, you start to glow from within. And it might not even be a physical thing. It's like people can perceive your aura, they can perceive your spiritual dimension, you know, because there's more to people than meets the eye, you know. We're not just these physical selves, we're etheric and spiritual selves too, you know. And I think I really do believe that, you know, that we have not just the physical body, but also like a spiritual or an auric or etheric body, or even multiple layers to it, who knows. But I get that impression, you know, that it's like we have an aura and we can all subliminally pick up on other people's auras, you know. And I think this is where gut feeling comes into it, you know, like you either get a good feeling or a bad feeling about a person. And I think that's because there's like an energy that's transmitting that we can't like fully pick up on logically, but we just feel it anyway. And I think what retention does is it kind of just lights up that energy about you, you know, like whatever field it is that's around you, it just lights that up. It makes it more vital, you know, more brimming with life and energy. And of course, like attracts to like, so life attracts to life, life seeks out more life, and death seeks out death, you know. So I think when you're brimming with that life force energy, that's a lot of what attracts people to you, you know, that people can sense that life force energy and they're just drawn to it, they want to be around it, you know. So, and that's not even in a physical sense where, let's say, somebody sees you and they come up to you. That might be one side of it, you know, that people kind of open up to you more, they kind of open conversation with you more. People kind of look your way more, or whatever it is, you know. that's the kind of more practical side of it. But I feel like it works at distance too, you know, that people reach out to you more and people are just attracted to you more in general, I feel, you know. So that's how it works. And that's the explanation, I feel, you know, is that the seed of man is like literally a very powerful life force. So when that's cultivated, it just has immense effects physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But yeah, getting back to this, I suppose this is what I'm talking about here, referring to the emotional states, you know, from guilt to shame up to fear, anger, pride, you know, courage, all of this. This is, in essence, the map of consciousness laid forth by Dr. David Hawkins in his works, in his books, in his talks, all of that. So definitely check him out as well, or make a note of him if you're listening to this. But moving on, you know, from like willingness, acceptance, neutrality, those states, and what we explored there, it goes even further. I feel, you know, that the next big level on from that is I think what's called reason. So like reason, if you put the scale of emotions as Dr. David Hawkins did on a level from 0 to 1000, the negative states, they go from 0 to 200. So guilt and shame are right down the bottom. It goes up and up and up until you get to around 190, which is the level of pride. 200 then is like the critical threshold where we cross over from non-integrous states to integrous states. Or you could say from force-based states to power-based states. So power is in essence God. So the more you cultivate yourself, the more you cultivate your seed, the more you actually get in touch with God, with the Most High, with the source of life. You know, it's life itself flowing through you. And the more you can cultivate that, the more positive your mental state becomes in general. Like, of course, you'll still have some ups and downs, obviously, you know, I'm not saying that, but for the most part, you know, you become more powerful in yourself. And yeah, you know, moving up from 200, it's like those states we talked about, like willingness, or well, it starts with courage and then willingness, acceptance, neutrality, all of that. But then it gets up to reason, which is at the level of around 400s. So 400 to 499. And we can see this, I feel, with the practice of retention as well, that I find that it like stimulates your intellect, you know, that it's like, you know, that idea that the ancient Greeks talked about the muses, you know, or your demon. So not demon in a negative sense, you know, demon in a negative sense is D-E-M-O-N, but the Greeks spoke about the daemon or the demon, which is D-A-E-M-O-N, so it's got an A in there as well before the E. And that sense of demon was different. It wasn't like, you know, the demons of Christianity or Islam or whatever it is, you know, these negative entities, which I believe do exist, by the way. And interestingly, they tie in with this whole journey of breaking away from negative vices. But that's another matter. The Greeks spoke about this demon with an A, which is essentially inspiration. And, you know, it ties in with the other Greek concept of the muses, M-U-S-E-S. And what all of those were, in essence, was divine inspiration. You know, it's what comes to you and gives you insights and ideas. It's, if you sit down to write, it's what flows out of you onto paper, you know, what gives you this divine inspiration. Because some part of us knows a lot of our best creations, the intellect, you know, the ideas that we share. Like, even I feel recording it, just a piece of content like this, like a lot of what I'm saying, it's not really coming from my logical mind, you know, it's not coming from my own personal ego as such, it's coming from beyond, you know. And that's with any form of creation, it's like it just flows through you, you know, it takes you over. Like with these videos, yeah, some of them, I think in the future I would like to do bullet points and stuff and maybe categorize the information so it can be more succinct. But when I go on a rant like this, which is what I like to do for these videos especially, it just kind of just flows through me, you know. So I feel like that's getting tapped in with inspiration, and I feel like that whole process, it's accelerated, it's strengthened through the process of retaining, of cultivating your sexual energy. And I think, like, I feel that when I squander my sexual energy, like I can't it's more difficult for me to act from an inspired place and to have interesting ideas flowing through my mind, and to share that with other people. So, and I know other people, like, you feel this as well, like going through this journey of retention, that it stimulates the mind, it gets you more connected with your reasoning faculties. So that's the level of 400s. It's a very high level, to be inspired in that way. And I think retention, it gets you to that place of inspiration. You can feel it, like when you're going about your day-to-day life, you just feel truly inspired, you feel energized, and you feel like you could put your mind to anything. You could sit down and write, you could do whatever creative activity comes to you naturally. Like, it's probably going to be different for different people, but whatever it is that is your creative outlet or your means of expression, you just feel totally inspired to engage in that. And when you do so, the ideas, they just flow more readily, and you just become connected to, I guess, what you could call the collective unconscious. That's what Carl Jung calls this, and Nikola Tesla, I believe, referred to that as well. You're getting connected with a greater source than yourself, and that's very inspiring. And moving up then, of course, after reason comes the level of love. So love is in the 500s and beyond. And that's when we're getting into truly spiritual states of being. And I will say, I haven't always felt this, and it's something that I'm, working towards and looking to cultivate more in my life. But I feel like the practice of retention, it does bring you towards this state as well of greater love, like moving from, I suppose the great distinction is moving from fear to love, and fear is all about being closed off, it's about being guarded, it's about judgment, it's about isolating yourself, it's about all of this, and that applies to social interactions, of course, when you're out and about, or when you're having conversations, or with women as well, like, I feel like retention, that practice, just brings you into a more loving state in general, where you begin to, your consciousness rises up essentially, and you feel more connected to everyone and everything. You start to see yourself in others more and more, and you start to just feel your connection to life. And I think that's where a lot of passion comes from. You feel connected, you feel a desire to serve. It's like turning the focus away from yourself, just yourself, towards others, and there's a greater desire for connection, there's a greater desire for participation in life. You want the zest of life, you want the juice out of life, you want to give life the squeeze and give it your best, but yeah, I feel like in relationships you become more present, more loving. You just feel more connected with people, and moving on up the scale, then it just gets even further. It goes towards, feelings of joy and peace. I think that can come too, and I've had that. You just get this feeling of intense joy sometimes, when you're on this journey, where it just comes from nowhere, it just comes from, it feels like inside of yourself, but also beyond yourself, just this feeling of joy. Just feeling very contented with life, and again, feeling on your purpose, feeling like you're capable of achieving anything that you set your mind to. But not even that, it's like it gets to a point where you feel like, although yes, you would like to achieve things, it's like you don't even need to. You just feel so contented in yourself, in the present moment even. You feel just so contented with life, and that's a very beautiful place to be. And I feel like that's why this practice is so worthwhile, like you're exchanging a few seconds of pleasure that are coming from a very craven, a very animalistic place, where you feel enslaved almost. Like you're trading that for this more long-lasting, fulfilling, spiritual, blissful state, of being just full up within, like literally full up from the inside out with your own essence, with your own energy, with your own vitality, And of course, when you fill yourself up on that basis, like your cup eventually overflows, your cup runneth over, as they say. So this isn't just about you either. It's about the impact that you have on others. And it's like, as you retain your vital essence, as you cultivate your energy within, that inevitably flows outwards into the world, you know, through the works that you create, through, you know, what you share with others, through your message, through the impact that you have. But on a more profound and perhaps even more important level, it flows out into the world in terms of your level of consciousness and through the energy that you're conveying to others, you know. And I feel like that's really where our power is. You know, there's a lot of glamour and there's a lot of glorification of, you know, work and creations and all of that. And all of that is very beautiful, you know, I'm not going to deny that, of course. And it's very important, I feel, to be passionate about life and to be creating and to be putting out your expressions in whatever way that is, or using your skills in whatever way that shows up for you in your life. It's going to be different for everyone. But David Hawkins alludes to this, Eckhart Tolle alludes to this, a lot of people in the spiritual side of things, they allude to this, that the biggest impact that we can have on the world is through our energy. It's through how we show up as people, you know, how literally the energy that we emit out into the world. And I guess this ties in with, again, with the idea of the aura, you know, our etheric being, our etheric body. How that emits, how that's perceived, you know, and the impact that has on others, like the energy we're putting out. And I feel like the practice of retention is one of the best ways, one of the best hacks or cheat codes to like immediately start improving that energy, to start improving the foundation of everything else, you know. So I think it's just a very virtuous practice in that respect, that it's not just about us, it's about other people too. You know, you literally show up as a better person for everyone you come into contact with, and that has ripple effects. So I think that's really something to consider, you know, if you're going through a challenging time where maybe you're dealing with a lot of urges, or you're dealing with repeated relapses and you're looking to get back on the horse. I think considering all of this can be just very powerful, and especially considering who it is you're being, you know, because everything is perceived by others. You know, I know that can be kind of an uncomfortable thought, but I think like literally our thoughts, our emotions, but more fundamentally the energy that we're emitting, it's all picked up by others. And we're getting what's happening here is we're getting back to points that I've spoken about in previous videos on this topic, but I feel like I will always come back to these points because it's essential, really. And this understanding, it's like possibly the most empowering understanding you can have with this practice, is understanding that everything is connected, you know. So the outer world reflects your inner world. So this is, I feel, it's like a Trojan horse. It's like a positive Trojan horse with this movement, that guys are being attracted to this movement for very, you know, sometimes material reasons of like, oh, you know, I can become more successful or somewhat better. They sometimes think like, oh, I can become more confident, or, you know, I can be better with women, or I can, you know, whatever. It's like that. But I feel like the deeper spiritual reason, or the lessons, the big lesson we're learning here, is that through this practice, because every practice can be a gateway into spirituality, and semen retention is no exception. But with this practice, I feel what we're learning is that on the deepest level is that we are connected with everything. You know, we are not separate individuals. We are not separate beings, you know, isolated egos, or whatever you want to call it. We are connected to everybody else that we see in the world around us. We are connected to every other living being, every other sentient being. The world, like literally what you're seeing with your two eyes right now, literally what you're perceiving with all your senses, all of that is a reflection of your inner world. It's your inner world projected outwards like a holograph around you, and you're witnessing everything. It's all intimately connected, the inner and the outer. As they say, as within, so without. Or as the universe, so the soul. So your soul is intimately connected with the universe at large. And in essence, what it is, it's like semen retention is like turning a dial. It's like turning a dial so that your perception changes. So that perception of the outer world changes as you turn that dial, as you begin to retain your vital essence. Your world itself is coloured in the image of that practice. So that's why, people's behaviour changes, people act differently towards you, your feeling of capability changes, life becomes more synchronous, it flows more, life becomes more serendipitous, meaning, the right things show up at the right time, things seem to go swimmingly for you in many areas, you have quote unquote good luck, it seems, and whatever you set your mind to just seems to work out, in a lot of cases at least. And what that is just, you're changing the image. I guess you could say this is a principle from the book Reality Transurfing by Vadim Zealand, if you want to check that out. But there's this idea of the mirror and the image and the reflection. So by you cultivating your seed, cultivating your vital essence, and by the way, you can still have sexual intercourse doing this, like there's things like coitus reservatus, carezza, where you don't ejaculate, or if you're a guy by himself, there's things like, there's some people believe in it, some people don't, like tantra, like where you can masturbate without ejaculation. I think sometimes that can be a risky endeavour, so you kind of have to weigh it up. But yeah, in essence, when you cultivate your seed, like you're storing up that life force, that vital essence within you, and that is the image. You're changing the image within yourself. So now you're on an internal spiritual level, now you have more life force, you're living a more virtuous lifestyle, you could say, from one perspective. And that inevitably, like the world inevitably has to meet you halfway, and the world inevitably has to reflect back that inner state of abundance, connection, higher states of consciousness, confidence, bliss, joy, love, all of that. The world inevitably, it literally has no choice in the matter. It's just natural law, universal law, that the world has to reflect that state back to you now. And so that's the mirror principle at work. I made a video about that on the channel as well, the mirror principle, reality transurfing. So that's that's the game in essence. I feel is like the world will reflect back to you your newfound abundance, your newfound energy and vitality. And not only that, and so that essentially is a very exciting prospect. But not only that, but there's also that aspect we talked about of your consciousness is rising, it's elevating. So that is having a very benevolent, beneficial effect on not only yourself and your subjective experience of life, but the impact you have on others and helping others and being of service to others, So it's a very selfless practice. It's a very selfless act. It seems, this is what I was talking about, it seems selfish in the beginning, like we're doing it for our own reasons, but I think gradually we open up to the idea that it's not just about us, this benefits everyone, and I think virtuosity, living a good life from a kind of a spiritual perspective is always a good thing, and this is it in essence, it's as foundational as it gets, I feel, like not overindulging in pleasure and learning to be steadfast and learning to cultivate our vitality and energy. It's good for everyone. And so yeah, that's it. I feel that semen retention is a very powerful spiritual practice. It raises our level of awareness, our level of consciousness. It empowers us in so many different ways. It increases our vitality. It just makes us a much better person, showing up in the lives of everyone we meet and those we love. And the other aspect of it too is that as we raise our level of consciousness, we become more empowered, like literally. We become more filled with the power of God to flow through us and to act through us and to draw whatever we need more serendipitously into our lives. And the other side of it is that as we cultivate our vitality, and as we become more, like we're literally cultivating our abundance within. So the world then has no choice but to reflect that abundance back to us like a mirror, the reflection reflecting the image. So that's it in essence, that's why I feel it's such a powerful practice. And going back to the very beginning of the video, like, I also feel like it's in alignment with nature to conserve such a precious fluid and to be in a more vital, confident, conscious state of being than to deplete ourselves and just totally give in to animalistic desires. So yeah, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll be making more content on this subject as well as other areas on the channel, all pertaining to spirituality, vitality, becoming the best version of yourself that you can, connecting the dots together, ascertaining truth, discerning truth from falsehood, all of that good stuff. So yeah, if you liked the video and you're not already subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you around. Thanks for watching.